In the opening scene, Tanisu is walking home from the convenience store with a bag of groceries, accompanied by his brother Snow, who's in dog form. He smiles, realizing how well Snow is adjusting to being a dog and fitting in. When they get home, the place is empty and dark. He tries calling out, but no one responds, which freaks him out a bit, and he almost drops some fruit. Luckily, Snow helps him save it. They head to the living room and call out to anyone who might be home. Suddenly, Isuri sneaks up and scares Tanisu with spider legs hanging down her back. He waits for her to fully appear before talking. When she does, she asks what he had for dinner. Tanisu mentions he got some veggies, but Isuri is only interested in meat. He brushes off his annoyed sister and checks on Suishi and Ashisu, who are busy doing their own thing. Once he knows they're all good, he heads to the kitchen to start cooking dinner for the family. While he cooks, he reflects on his life and talks about the powers his siblings got after their genes were messed with. Tanisu is pretty normal, but Isuri has animal-like agility and those spider legs. Snow can switch between being a dog and a human whenever he wants. Ashisu is the plant girl. Her body was modified to be like fertile soil for plants and mushrooms. She just needs sunlight and some water. And then there's Suishi, the quiet one, who can read minds. After having a mental breakdown, she locked herself up at home to avoid getting overwhelmed by too many thoughts at once. When he was younger, Tanisu's parents hired tutors to teach him stuff. Back then, he had to just watch as they did awful experiments on his siblings without being able to help. Snapping back to reality, Tanisu sees a bug on the kitchen wall and freaks out, realizing what's about to happen. Before he can react, Isuri goes wild and wrecks the kitchen, including all the groceries he just bought. Ashisu comes in and tosses all his food in the trash. Feeling sad, Tanisu worries about his siblings. He suggests they go out for dinner. Isuri gets excited and asks if they're having bugs for dinner. Tanisu tells her not to think like that and that they're just going to get regular food. Everyone refuses to go out with him, leaving him to sulk all day. He heads back to his room, turns off the TV that's playing the news, and takes a nap. When he wakes up, his siblings change their minds and decide to go out with Tanisu to an outdoor restaurant with a canopy. Once they get there, Tanisu shows his siblings how to wash their cups and pour tea for themselves. With a big smile, Tanisu tells them to order whatever they want from the menu. Isuri notices him smiling and asks what's up. Tanisu says he's just happy they finally have a chance to go out and be normal for a change. Isuri isn't really impressed, but keeps quiet. A few minutes later, the waiter brings their food, and Snow instantly turns into a dog, eating like a wild animal. The waitress picks Snow up and sets him down, giving him some dumplings to munch on. Isuri plays with her food while the others don't seem to care much about theirs. Tanisu watches his siblings gobble down their food and make a mess of the table without a worry. He overhears people staring at them and making mean comments. When he gets fed up with it, he calls out his siblings on their behavior. Isuri stops him from going off too much and asks why he's so hung up on them acting normal. Tanisu shyly tells them about meeting a cool guy before and admits he might be selfish, but he just wants to enjoy some good times with his siblings. That's all. After hearing this, Snow and Ashihei behave themselves and eat like regular people for Tanisu's sake. Isuri finally eats a little after being convinced, and they all discover how tasty the food is. Tanisu stays calm and hopes everything goes well this time. Luckily, his siblings seem eager to learn, and Tanisu teaches them how to use forks. After eating out for about an hour, Tanisu and his siblings get ready to head home. Just as they step out of the restaurant, Tanisu takes one last look at his siblings and remembers all the tough times they've had. His siblings notice he's crying and ask what's wrong. Tanisu tells them not to worry about him and that he'll be okay. With that, he continues the journey home with his siblings, ending the day on a happy note. A few years back, when Tanisu was way younger, his parents got him a tutor to help him with tough subjects like advanced math and science. But the poor teacher was embarrassed because Tanisu solved all the problems she threw at him and showed her he didn't really need her help. After he schooled her one day, Tanisu heard his siblings playing outside and asked his dad why they weren't studying. His dad explained that his siblings had their own powers and didn't need to use their brains much since their abilities were already working for them. Soon after, Tanisu's mom came over and asked what he wanted for dinner. He asked for milk pudding, and she got up to make it. Tanisu also wanted some for his siblings, but his dad told him not to worry about them since he didn't want to mess with the data. Fast forward to now, Isuri is arguing with Tanisu while the others just sit there watching quietly. Tanisu was scolding Isuri for going outside without asking him, but she was trying to tell him she's not a kid and can do whatever she wants. Tanisu jokingly threatened her by putting one of their weird meds on the table, saying he'd make her take it if she didn't listen. He felt like he deserved respect since he was doing all the hard work at home and trying to keep the family together. The others thought about what Tanisu said and agreed with him, so Isuri had to give in to his orders. But she made him promise to handle the house stuff without needing anyone's help, and Tanisu assured her he'd take care of it. With that, he put on his overalls and headed outside to grab something. He got to the supermarket and stopped to look at some snacks. Since he was broke, he couldn't buy any. Meanwhile, a little girl around his age got a free snack from the cashier after buying some stuff. She saw Tanisu staring at the display and walked over to him. She introduced herself and offered him the free snack. Tanisu initially said no, but then he took a spoon and enjoyed it. The little girl gave him the rest of the snack and went on her way. Tanisu started his long walk back home, daydreaming about getting lost. When he snapped back to reality, he realized he had a terrible sense of direction and could easily get lost. He thought about calling his siblings, but he didn't want them to come save him, so he kept walking and ran into a coyote. Tanisu took off running as fast as he could until he got lost in the forest. About an hour later, Tanisu's siblings start to get worried about him, so they leave the house and rush into the forest to find him. Meanwhile, Tanisu is just sitting around in the thick woods, wondering if his siblings are looking for him yet. Not too far away, Snow and Ashisu find themselves face to face with a pack of coyotes. Ashisu toughens her leg like a tree trunk and lets one of the coyotes bite her there. Unfortunately for the coyote, all its teeth fall out, and it runs away screaming with its buddies. Then, Suishi and Isuri show up to help with the search. Suishi uses her mind-reading skills to locate Tanisu and finds him at the bottom of a cliff. But to get him, Isuri, who's a bit wild, has to climb down the cliff to rescue him. Isuri happily takes on the challenge and moves through the forest branches to reach the bottom of the cliff. There, she spots Tanisu looking sad and calls out to him. She almost loses her cool, but then pulls herself together and tries to scold him in her own way. Tanisu, super happy to see his sister, starts crying and hugs her tightly. Isuri carries him out of the forest and brings him back to the group. That night, everyone goes home, and Tanisu thanks Isuri for saving him. Isuri blushes a little and asks what Tanisu had planned for dinner. Tanisu tells them to forget about dinner and check out the improv stuff he bought for them at the market. When they get home, he hangs a weird bag on Isuri's back and folds her spider legs into it. Now she can walk like a regular person without getting weird looks. He also finds some improv gear for Ashisu so she can cover up her plant-like body when she goes out for a walk. Both sisters thank their thoughtful little brother for helping them out and get back to their day. The next day, Tanisu reconnects with one of his tutors after going through his old notes and finding her phone number. After the call, Tanisu tells his siblings he's meeting the woman on the mainland the next day. Ashisu wants to confirm who this tutor is, but Tanisu tells her not to stress too much about it and that they need someone to help them out of their current mess, like a caretaker. Even though there's a bit of grumbling from the others, they all agree to Tanisu's plan. Now they have to figure out who's going with Tanisu to the mainland tomorrow. After narrowing down some options, Suishi surprises everyone by volunteering to go with Tanisu, since she usually doesn't like being out, especially in crowded places. The next day rolls around quickly, and Suishi tags along with Tanisu for his meeting. While they're on their way, Tanisu spots a guy and asks him for help, but the guy just ignores him and keeps walking. Then, an older woman shows up and tries to play on Tanisu's kindness by asking for cash to catch a taxi. Tanisu almost falls for her act, but Suishi sees right through it and knows what's up from the start. Just as Tanisu is about to give the woman a dime, she grabs his hand and leads him to the location. They walk a bit until they get tired. Tanisu switches to plan B and just asks people if they know how to get to Mr. Hakun, where the meeting is supposed to be. Right after he asks, Suishi closes her eyes and starts reading the minds of everyone around, hoping to get some directions. Luckily, her plan works, and she figures it out. Once she's done, she takes Tanisu to the subway station to catch a train to the mountains. On the train, a thief tries to snag Tanisu's wallet from his left pocket, but Suishi spots him and warns Tanisu to keep his wallet close. Tanisu thanks her again as they continue their journey. A little later, Tanisu and Suishi arrive and find the contact waiting for them. When the tutor sees Tanisu, her former student, she walks over with a smile and asks why he reached out. Tanisu explains that he and his siblings are in some trouble. When she asks what happened, Tanisu gets too shy to explain. To lighten the mood, the lady suggests they chat over lunch. Tanisu and Suishi agree to go with the lady to a nearby cafe for some French toast and iced coffee. Tanisu digs into his lunch and thanks the lady for treating them. While they eat, the lady notices Suishi staring at her and asks Tanisu who she is. Tanisu introduces Suishi as his quiet sister who doesn't like being outside much. The lady wonders if their meeting was about her, but Tanisu says no. She then asks why he contacted her, and Tanisu starts sharing his sad story. In the end, he asks her to help take care of them and keep things organized. The lady, keeping a serious face, tells Tanisu straight up that she can't help him. When she's asked why, she reminds him of the embarrassment she faced while tutoring him when he was younger. Being a child prodigy, Tanisu had no trouble solving math problems, even the ones she struggled with. Eventually, word got out, and people started mocking her for not being able to teach an 8-year-old. This ruined her reputation and knocked her down a peg. Then she loses it and calls Tanisu a human experiment. Even worse, she tells him to go to the government so they can turn him into a guinea pig. Suishi, fed up, grabs her brother's hands and gets ready to leave the cafe. Before they go, she turns to the tutor and spills all her secrets right to her face. Then she gives a final warning not to mess with them, or she'll regret it. After that, she takes Tanisu back to the port and they hop on the ferry. On their way home, Tanisu has a meltdown and asks his sister what she thinks of him. She reassures him that she thinks highly of him and would never see him as a science experiment. When they get back to the shore, Sumeri shows up and reintroduces herself to Tanisu. Tanisu, about to share his real name, remembers his meeting with the tutor and lies, saying his name is Kanisu. Sumeri writes her number on a piece of paper and hands it to Tanisu, telling him to call her if he needs help. Tanisu takes the number and turns to his sister to check if Sumeri is genuine. When he finds out she is, he breaks down in tears and cries like a baby as they walk home. A bit of background shows what went down the night the government found Tanisu's parents on the island they ran to. Instead of freaking out about getting caught, Tanisu's parents calmly approached their kids and gave them some pills to make them human for a little while during their getaway. To them, going to prison for a few years was just a break. Tanisu's dad made Tanisu the caretaker of the house while they were gone and told him about the data he stored in the usual spot, as he called it. He also gave Tanisu the password to access the data and left the rest of their research for him to finish. After that, Tanisu's parents left him and his siblings in the lab and went out to turn themselves in to the government. A little while later, the lab exploded, and Tanisu's siblings managed to get themselves and Tanisu safely out to the other side of the shore. Since they lost their parents and were basically orphans, the police found them at the shore and took them into child services. With the pill's effects fading, Tanisu knew he had to find them some shelter before the government figured out they were used as lab rats. Luckily, before the effects completely wore off, the police found them a new home and moved them in. But once the effects faded, the side effects kicked in. Fast forward to today, and Tanisu is seen writing in his diary when he suddenly shuts it, grabs the bag of pills, and looks at his siblings before picking the bag up again. He suggests tossing the drugs so they don't use them again, but just as he's about to do that, Snow wakes up and mentions a noise he heard downstairs. He urges Tanisu to check it out to make sure nothing happens to them. Just then, the other siblings, who heard the noise, wake up and follow Snow and Tanisu downstairs. When they get there, Tanisu finds the phone ringing. He picks it up and answers, and it's the landlord letting him know he'll be coming over for a visit the next day. From what he could tell, the landlord sounded like a pretty normal person with no bad intentions. Tanisu looks at his siblings again and worries about what might happen if the landlord found them like this. So, he suggests they all head back to the lab on the other island early the next morning to search for more medicine and research data. Almost immediately, Isuri and Ashisu get excited and start packing for their trip back home. Sadly, Tanisu tells them it's not necessary because they aren't going home for a reunion. Instead, he pulls out the dreaded drug and tells them they're going back to get more of that. When they see the drug, Isuri and Ashisu jump back, scared of that awful pill. Tanisu, however, promises them he wants to dedicate his life to researching the medicine so he can get rid of the harmful side effects and make it safe for them to take next time. Isuru and Ashisu get really upset and start yelling at Tanisu to stop trying to make them take such a terrible drug. When things get too wild, Snow jumps in and reminds the girls about that party they saw on TV. Right away, Ashisu and Isuri start having fun and reminiscing about how awesome the party was. Snow promises to take them there if they can turn back into humans. Hearing this, the girls immediately back Tanisu's plan and cheer him on. Tanisu looks at poor Tanisu and asks if he wants to join them outside. Snow says he'd love that, and Tanisu promises to make him happy. The next day, Tanisu takes his siblings to the seaport by their island and picks a few of them to come with him to the island where the lab is, so they can search for it. Suishi decides to stay back to avoid too many people. Tanisu agrees and heads to the island with the others. They mess around a bit before making an inflatable boat to get to the other side of the island. Suishi goes back to the house only to find out that Tanisu had the key the whole time. A little later, Tanisu and his crew get to the lab site. On their way to the building, he warns his siblings to watch out for the government officials swarming the place. They have to sneak in and help each other out so they don't get caught. Once they reach the building, Isuri jumps through a window into a dark room and opens the door for her siblings to come in. Tanisu tells them to head to the control room next to the kitchen so they can get a couple of monitors working and see what's going on around the building. Little did they know, the cameras and stuff in the dark room were just motion sensors, waiting to catch any intruders. Still, they make it to the control room and are surprised to see about 10 to 12 monitors still working. Isuri gets curious and asks Tanisu about the data that should be there. Tanisu, wanting some alone time, tells the girls to go back outside and look for an escape route just in case something weird happens. Meanwhile, Suishi, who's stuck outside, senses something off and goes to check it out. While all that's going down, Tanisu and his siblings slip out of the kitchen control room and sneak past two researchers chilling in the living room to reach their next stop. top. After dodging the two, Tanisu takes a moment to check out the building's blueprints. He spots a loophole in the plan and shares how to use it with his siblings, so they can hit up the main lab and grab the rest of the data and drugs too. Once he finishes telling them the plan, they all hustle out, making sure to stay out of sight. They find a small room, and Tanisu figures out where the data safe is. He tells Isuri to climb up there with her spider legs and punch in the password to get the hard copy of the files and bring it down to him. Isuri grabs the files and almost drops them, which would have made a scene. Luckily, Tanisu catches the files before they hit the floor and checks to make sure everything's there. Happy with what he finds, Tanisu tells his siblings to get ready to bounce so they can make it home before the landlord shows up. But bad news for them, there's a lightning storm outside, so they gotta wait for the weather to clear before they can plan their getaway. Snow, back in his human form, complains to Tanisu that the lightning is messing with him staying in his dog form longer. Tanisu, kind of freaked out seeing his older brother naked, throws some clothes over him and sighs in relief. Just then, Isuri and Ashisu ask for a bathroom break, but Tanisu tells them to hold it until they're outside. This really ticks them off as they grumble about being ladies to Tanisu. In the end, poor Tanisu has no choice but to let them do their thing. A few moments later, Tanisu hears two researchers coming their way. He thinks fast and hides in the women's bathroom with Isuri and Ashisu. As the researchers get closer, Tanisu hears them chatting about the old researchers and how out there their work was. Suddenly, they hear a toilet flush nearby and get a bit spooked. One of them even wonders if there are ghosts in the place, but the other one toughens up and goes in to check it out. Tanisu, hearing them approach, quickly shoves Snow and the girls into a bathroom stall and locks it to keep them from being seen. Luckily, his plan works as the researchers get bored and leave after finding nothing. Next up, we see Suishi sitting in front of the house, just staring at the street while she accidentally tunes into the thoughts of people walking by. Out of nowhere, she picks up on the landlord's thoughts and realizes he's super eager to finally meet the kids everyone's been talking about. A moment later, the landlord shows up on his bike and finds Suishi home alone. He gets a bit freaked out as random thoughts pop into his head, which Suishi can hear. Eventually, Suishi tells him why she was outside, and the landlord pulls out his spare key to unlock the door. Once they're inside, he makes some tea and tries to chat with the quiet Suishi. He really struggles to keep the conversation going and even starts sweating, but finally, he gathers the courage to introduce himself as Yu Kaito, or Kuma, his nickname. Suishi can see he's anxious and tells him to drink his tea to chill out. Kaito takes her advice and sips his tea, which thankfully calms him down enough to stop the sweating. To avoid any more awkwardness, Suishi gets up and heads to the bathroom to wash up. While there, she keeps praying for her little brother and siblings to come back safely so she won't be alone with the landlord. Just then, something makes her look out the window, and she sees her siblings walking home in the rain with an umbrella. She throws a stone down at them, which gets their attention, and they start making weird noises that the landlord hears. He steps outside and invites the siblings in for dinner. After they're all cleaned up and dry, Kaito orders pizza and Coke for dinner. Tanisu and his siblings dig into the pizza and enjoy it. Kaito tries to make small talk, but then Tanisu gets bratty and throws a fit about Kaito not caring for them. Snow tells Tanisu to chill out since he's being rude, but Tanisu insists that the landlord is a nice guy who won't let anything bad happen to them. This unexpected outburst surprises Snow, and he wonders if it's because of what they went through at the lab. Turns out, Tanisu and his siblings had to knock out two researchers to buy time to escape. They did this by forcing Snow to turn into a dog so he could run out of the bathroom and distract the guards long enough for them to take them out from behind. Before leaving the building, Ashisu and Isuri wrote a creepy message on the wall in their blood to scare the researchers when they woke up. Meanwhile, Tanisu goes upstairs to look for Snow and finds him in dog form. He suddenly remembers how things were when they were younger and feels a bit sad for Snow. Eventually, he heads back downstairs with Snow to find the girls. Little did he know, Ashisu and Isuri were already back in their old room upstairs, checking out old photos and stuff. Tanisu stops by their old study room and feels a wave of nostalgia as great memories flood his mind. He gets a bit sadder than usual and leaves before he gets too down. Luckily for them, this landlord is a good one. Seeing how helpless the kids are, he lets them stay with him until they're old enough to take care of themselves. Back at the lab, the two researchers wake up to find the bloody message on the wall. It freaks them out, and they quietly leave that part of the building to the ghosts who wrote such a weird message. The next morning, Tanisu wakes up super late and realizes he overslept. He jumps out of bed, gets ready, and heads downstairs for breakfast. When he gets there, he sees everyone at the table, happily eating. Isuri takes a bite of her bread and enjoys the flavor. The otters are also loving the new meals, way better than what they used to eat. This makes makes the landlord curious about what the kids have been eating before. He checks on Tanisu to see if he slept well. Tanisu thanks him for getting them a bed since he's been sleeping on the floor for a while. Then, he starts worrying about what he'll do when the drug he gave his siblings wears off in 24 hours. He had them take it the night before, and it's already been over 12 hours. So, he figures he's got just 12 hours left to come up with a plan or face the music. He thinks about giving them another dose, but worries the side effects could be worse with more doses. Just as he's about to say something, Kaido jumps in and suggests they all go mountain climbing later for some fun. Tanisu thinks it's a great idea since there are trees and forests everywhere in the mountains. Kaido asks the others what they think, hoping for good vibes, but he's shocked when both Ashisu and Isuri say it's up to Tanisu, their youngest sibling. Luckily, Tanisu accepts the invite and tells everyone to get dressed so they can hit the mountains soon. Kaito just sits there, staring at the odd kids. After getting dressed, Kaido and the kids head out to the mountains. On the way, Tanisu keeps an eye on them to make sure they're not zoning out or acting strange in front of the landlord. At one point, Snow gets a little twitchy, but Tanisu ignores it and keeps chatting with the others. Soon, their talk is interrupted by a fight happening a few feet away. Tanisu looks up and sees his friend, Sumir, arguing with two little boys who are trying to kill a spider in its home. He rushes over to help Sumir stand up to the boys. To his surprise, the boys don't budge. Kaido shows up a moment later and tries to scare the boys into thinking killing a spider is wrong. Unfortunately, the boys aren't toddlers, so they aren't scared of his lame tricks. With their minds set on destroying the spider, one of the boys grabs a short stick and swings it at the spider on its web. In a flash, Snow appears and stops the boy from hitting the spider. Isuri also shows up to check on the spider, only to find out it's already dead. She picks it up to eat it, but Tanisu stops her. Isuri accidentally drops the spider when three girls come over to say hi and compliment her curly blonde hair. She gets a bit shy and tries to shoo the girls away. But then Ashisu, her twin, tells Isuri to cheer up and be proud of herself. Isuri smiles at the compliments and gives the kids some friendly advice. Just then, the tour guide calls them back for the tour, so the three little girls say goodbye and hurry back to their teachers. After they leave, Kaito and his crew keep trekking until they hit the top of one of the mountains. There, they spot Sumire and her classmates with their tour guide, and Tanisu waves at her. Snow waves at the little girl too, but she gets too shy to wave back. Moving on, Kaito tells everyone to follow him to the windmill so they can check out how electricity is made right there. But Tanisu notices that the drug is wearing off quicker for Snow. Worried that Snow might turn into a dog any second, Tanisu asks Kaito if Snow can use the bathroom so he doesn't make a mess. So, Snow gets his bathroom break and rushes off to take care of business. Not long after, Tanisu and Sumire make it close to the top floor of the windmill and get to see the huge forest from one of the windows. They spot a familiar white dog running around in the woods and see a couple carving their names into a tree to show their love. Tanisu and Sumire have a moment together, but then they quickly snap back to reality. Sumire asks about the white-haired guy who saved the spider from the bullies earlier, and Tanisu introduces her to Snow, his big brother. Sumire starts daydreaming about Snow for a bit and totally ignores poor Tanisu. Meanwhile, Ashisu and Isuri are chilling one level up when suddenly, Isuri starts to change. Knowing what's about to happen, Isuri bolts downstairs and heads into the forest to get as far from people as she can. Suishi comes down to Tanisu's level and tells him about Isuri's problem. Tanisu rushes down the building and chases after Isuri into the woods. Ashisu follows her twin sister into the forest, trying to stop her from turning into whatever she's becoming. But Isuri is too scared to let anyone near her and pushes Ashisu away to keep her safe. When Isuri's body can't handle it anymore, she trips and starts transforming into a full spider. In a minute, Isuri becomes a spider and takes off deeper into the jungle. On her way, she runs into the bullies from before and threatens to eat them. On the flip side, Ashisu gets up and remembers all the great times she had with her twin sister when they were younger and pretty much the same in every way. Eventually, she gathers enough courage to stand up and face her sister so she can buy the boys some time to escape. Her plan works, but now she's left alone with a 50-pound spider that's hungry for human flesh. What's Ashisu gonna do now? Can she fight her sister like an enemy, or will she find a way out of this mess? Before we dive into the question, let's rewind a few years to catch up with the inseparable twins, Ashisu and Isuri. Back in the day, Isuri's hair was still dark like her sister's, and they were basically joined at the hip. One day, they called their brother, Snow, to play hide-and-seek with them. Snow, who always seems to get the short end of the stick, stood there regretting his decision as he got ready to find the girls. Fast forward to now, and we see Snow sniffing the ground for any signs of Isuri and Ashisu. Tanisu tagged along to make sure he was there when Snow eventually found them. Meanwhile, Ashisu wakes up with her body body all tangled in veins and leaves. She looks across the river and spots her sister, Isuri, still in her spider form, staring at her. While Isuri thinks about what to do with the strange girl in front of her, we flash back to that day's hide-and-seek game. Just after becoming the Seeker, Snow transformed into his dog form and tracked the girl's scents into the forest. He found Ashisu first, then moved on to look for her twin. Isuri tried to trick Snow by covering her spider legs with leaves, making him think she was Ashisu, but Snow saw right through her disguise and called her out as Isuri, shocking both girls. Isuri asked Snow how he figured it out, and he coldly replied that he could smell her from a mile away since they were pretty different. This made Isuri so mad that she stormed home, complaining about Snow's rude comments. She barged into a room where her sister was and accidentally knocked over some of their parents' experimental liquid onto her hair. The liquid changed Isuri's hair to blonde and curly, freaking the girls out. They rushed to their parents to tell them what happened. When their mom heard their story, she reassured them that the hair-changing liquid was harmless. However, the effects were permanent, so Isuri better get used to her new hair. If not, she could shave her head with her sister. Their dad even considered that and got the clippers ready to shave their hair off. Scared of losing their beautiful locks, Isuri took her sister and spun a web nest up in the ceiling of one of the mansion's rooms. Their parents tried to get them down to talk, but Isuri wasn't having it because she feared they were just teasing her. In the end, their parents walked away, leaving the twin sisters to support each other. Back to the present, Ashisu moved closer to her sister's creepy form, dipped one end of her roots in the river, and transformed into a tree that wrapped around Isuri. This was to protect the forest until the drug's side effects wore off. A little while later, the two boys from before head back to town and quickly tell the adults about the spider situation. Kaito and Suishi overhear them and ask for more details. Kaito, who thought Suishi would join him, is surprised to find out she's not coming. Still, he asks the boys to show him where it happened so he can handle it. Meanwhile, Snow and Tanisu track down their sisters to the exact spot. Tanisu is amazed to see Isuri and Ashisu transformed into a full-grown tree and can't resist collecting samples for his research. He walks around the huge tree, using tweezers to grab spider hairs and twigs. Suddenly, the tree wobbles and crashes to the ground. Tanisu and Snow, now back in their human forms, look at the girls and return to their original selves, safe and sound. He quickly dresses them and watches as they hug each other, happy to have made it through such a tough time. While the girls are hugging and praising each other, Snow tells Tanisu to appreciate his gift, since who knows what could have happened if he wasn't so smart. This makes Tanisu realize he should value his talent more. Soon after, Kaito and the two boys catch up to them to share news about the big bad spider. On the way home, Tanisu thinks about telling Kaito about their powers, hoping he'll accept them for who they really are. But he drops the idea and makes sure to get home in one piece. After spending hours in the nest that little Isuri made near the ceiling, little Snow comes by and invites the girls to snack with him. This annoys Isuri so much that she decides to teach him a lesson. She climbs down from her web, captures Snow, and ties him to a chair in a dark room lit only by a single bulb. When he wakes up, Snow finds himself blindfolded and asks the girls what's going on. Isuri hides with her sister in the darkest corner of the room and tells Snow to guess who's talking just by their voice. Snow easily figures out it's Isuri and tells her they're not that different. He then asks why she wants her and her sister to be so alike. Isuri tears up a bit and slaps Snow for his snarky comment. Eventually, Isuri comes to terms with the fact that she and her sister might be a little different after all, and that's totally okay. A few days after everything calms down, Isuri finds a stash of the drugs they used to become human, and even worse, Tanisu was hiding them. She pulls out a bunch and threatens to toss them if Tanisu doesn't get rid of them. Tanisu, realizing Isuri went through his stuff, confronts her and promises they won't have to take the drugs again. He also shares his secret project to tweak the drugs so they can stay human and normal forever, assuring her it'll work out. Happy with his answers, Isuri lets go of the drugs and lets Tanisu do his thing. Later, Tanisu thinks about the landlord and considers telling him their secret, but decides it's too soon. Like any smart person, he decides to chill and observe the landlord a bit more. The next morning, Kaito wakes up early and makes breakfast for the kids. When they get up, they're stoked to see a spread of delicious food waiting for them. While serving, Kaito tells them about the new furniture he ordered online for their rooms and how awesome it'll look when it arrives. When they ask why he didn't just go buy it in person, Kaito explains that buying big stuff like furniture can be tricky, especially living on an island. That's why online shopping has made things way easier. After hearing all this, Snow gets confused and asks Tanisu what the internet is. Poor Snow. Kaito notices and jokes about how they've been living under a rock. Tanisu cuts him off to keep things under wraps and brags about his smarts. There's a bit of awkward silence, but Kaito breaks it by inviting them to follow him to the furniture seller's house to pick up the stuff he bought. The kids happily agree and scarf down their food. After eating and getting ready, they all head into town to find the seller's place. On the way, Snow and the others except Tanisu, get excited about all the cool stuff for sale at the market. Tanisu tries to keep them in check, but Kaido tells him to chill and let the kids enjoy. Next, Kaido shows them the public bulletin board with pictures of the second-hand furniture he bought. Seeing how great it looks, Tanisu and his siblings are super happy to finally get something nice. Later, they stop at an ice cream shop, and Kaido treats them to some ice cream. At first, Tanisu turns down his ice cream, but eventually, he grabs some and continues on with the kids until they reach the second-hand store. They run into the store attendant, who happens to be Sumeri's tour guide from their mountain trip a few weeks ago, and stop to say hi. The guide asks Kaido what he's doing with kids he doesn't know. Kaido explains, but she scolds him for being too nice. While that's going on, Snow wanders into the store and finds a bunch of mirrors. He stares at them and starts feeling that awful sensation he gets right before he's about to change. Before he can, Kaido approaches the attendant and asks where he can find second-hand furniture. She gets curious and asks the kids why they're wearing familiar clothes. The kids tell her they got them from the recycling bin, which doesn't sit well with her, and she scolds Kaido for it. Then, she tells Kaido to head to the seller's building, and he takes the kids there right away. When they arrive, Kaido is shocked to find out that all the furniture is sold out. He asks the seller why she would do that, and she explains that her business is first come, first served, so she didn't have to hold anything for him. Hearing this, Kaido takes the kids home. On the way, he feels bad and apologizes for messing things up. At first, the kids don't get it, but then they come up with an idea to cheer him up. They take Kaido to the dump and encourage him to pick up furniture parts so they can put something together when they get home. Kaido is confused by this odd behavior since everyone usually likes new stuff, but he appreciates that the kids don't want anything to go to waste. So, he helps them gather the furniture parts and puts them together when they get home. While they're arranging the new furniture, Snow sneezes a bit, making Tanisu think he might have a fever. Still, Tanisu stays focused on finishing the task before it gets dark. Once they're done, Tanisu remembers the first day they were brought to the house when they had just argued and needed to settle down. Back then, they had to work together to assemble whatever little furniture they had. Now that their house is nicer, they're happier than ever to have an adult figure guiding them. Remember when Snow sneezed? Well, things got worse for him. He caught a nasty fever and ended up stuck in bed. Kaido called the doctor to check on him, but after a few days, the doctor ran out of medicine. He told Kaido he was too busy to head to the mainland for more. Kaido decided to tag along, and the doctor couldn't say no. That night, Isuri and her twin started to worry about Kaido and their little brother. Tanisu came down from Snow's room and shared how serious things had gotten. To make it worse, he said the new medicine wouldn't arrive on the island until the weekend. Knowing they had to act fast, Tanisu figured someone on the island could help them find the drugs they just needed to track that person down. Feeling down because he'd be alone, he was relieved when Isuri and Ashisu decided to go with him. Next, the trio got ready and left their house in Suishi's care before heading out to find the medicine. Soon after they left, Kaido got ready to go out too. Before he could leave, Suishi asked to use his computer. Kaido hesitated at first, but then Suishi read his mind and promised not to mess with his corn folder. Embarrassed, Kaido tried to explain that he only used that folder for studying. Suishi, already knowing what was up, thanked him and headed to his room to surf the web. Once on social media, she asked the community for info about a drug that could cure endemia. After getting a bunch of insults from trolls, she gave up and returned to her table. That's when she started remembering her time with Snow, the only sibling who really got her. Since nobody wanted to play with Suishi because of her powers, she often ended up alone. But Snow felt bad for her and turned into his dog form to keep her company. At least Suishi would struggle to read a dog's mind since she could barely understand their language. Over time, Snow let Suishi pet him in his dog form so she wouldn't feel so lonely. Just thinking about everything Snow did for her snaps her back to reality, and she jumps back on the computer to keep searching. After a few more minutes, someone finally chimes in and tells her about a local medicine from the island. Suishi gets super interested and asks where she can score that medicine. Little did she know, the guy was a predator in disguise. He slid into her DMs asking if she was a guy or a girl. At first, Suishi thought about lying about her gender, but then she said screw it and told him she was a girl. Once he found out, the predator showed his true colors and wanted to meet up before giving her the medicine for her sickness. Suishi used a bit of her powers to hear the creepy stuff he was thinking. She ignored him and found another contact who was willing to give her the medicine if she could pick it up herself. Feeling desperate, she shut off the computer and decided to go get the medicine on her own. She stopped by a nearby cafe to grab some instant coffee and wait for her contact. Not long after, Sumeri's tour guide showed up and sat near her. Suishi got curious and asked how she knew she was the one who called her. The lady not only refused to answer but also had this smug look on her face like she was trying to mess with Suishi. Suishi cut to the chase and asked her straight up where the medicine was. Before telling her, the lady challenged her to guess what she was thinking first. Suishi tried to read her mind but realized realized how tough that was, which freaked her out a bit, so she got up to leave the cafe. Sumire's tour guide stopped her and handed over the medicine. Suishi sat back down and made some small talk with the lady. The lady revealed her real identity and praised Suishi for sacrificing her peace for her brother. Snow should be okay in a few days if he takes the medicine and sticks to the dosage. Before leaving, Suishi told Sumire's tour guide that she was helping him because they all need each other to survive. Hearing this, the tour guide smiled at Suishi and wished her all the best. Later that night, Snow woke up in bed, twitching like a zombie. Unable to speak or call for help, he just lay there staring at the ceiling until he got tired. A few hours later, Tanisu and his siblings head back home with medicine for Snow. They go upstairs to check on their oldest brother but find his room empty. Confused, Suishi uses her powers to scan for Snow but gets no signal. Tanisu freaks out and bolts out of the house to look for him. Meanwhile, Snow, who's turned into some kind of zombie dog, is stalking a drunk guy as he stumbles home late at night. He waits until the guy is at his most vulnerable before attacking. Luckily for the drunk, part of his brain is still working. He spots the zombie dog coming and takes off screaming for help. Back in town, Tanisu and his siblings are showing people pictures of Snow, asking if anyone has seen him earlier. Unfortunately, no one has spotted the white-haired kid. Heartbroken, Tanisu thinks about searching the forest, since that's probably where Snow would go next. At the same time, the drunk guy runs into Sumeri while trying to escape from the zombie dog. She gets worried and asks if she can help, but the guy just shoves her away and keeps running. Right then, the zombie dog catches up and jumps on her. Tanisu, on the other hand, is sprinting through the forest as fast as he can to get to Snow before he hurts someone. On his way, he runs into a black cat that looks like it might attack him. Luckily, the rain is making it hard for the cat to do anything, so Tanisu just ignores it and keeps running. A little further ahead, Snow is fighting off the zombie dog's side of him, trying to turn back into a human. Sumeri sees that he's struggling and offers to help, but Snow isn't about to put a little girl in danger. He can feel the zombie dog trying to take control again. He bolts back into the forest to hide, but Sumeri follows him. She finds him passed out in the middle of nowhere and tries to get closer to help him. Unfortunately, she trips into a ravine and falls down. Snow hears her screams and jumps in to save her. Thankfully, he manages to help her out, and she's okay. But Snow is still having a tough time keeping it together. He runs to grab an umbrella for Sumeri to keep her dry from the rain and rushes back into the bushes to calm down. A few moments later, Snow comes back to Sumeri as a normal human again. To help him feel better, even though she didn't know who he really was, Sumeri lets Snow rest his head on her lap while they chill under a bright outdoor light. What they didn't realize was that Tanisu had already shown up a few minutes earlier and could see his big brother on Sumeri's lap. He hangs back and watches closely as Sumeri leans in to kiss Snow while he's fast asleep. Unable to handle it anymore, Tanisu runs off crying softly, feeling like he just got his heart broken for the first time. Snow hears someone running and wakes up right away to see who it is, but he doesn't spot anyone. When Tanisu gets home, he plops down on the floor, trying to convince himself that Sumeri isn't into his older brother, but then his negative side kicks in, telling him to stop trying to make his siblings fit together. It calls Tanisu a loser who can't even get the girl of his dreams. Plus, who would want to date or marry a monster? Sumeri? He doubts it. Tanisu just sits there, wishing the guy who looks like him was lying. He knows one thing for sure: Sumeri is in love with Snow. Tanisu still won't accept it as he struggles to keep it together. The voice in his head keeps mocking him, making him choose between living his best life or giving everything up for his messed up family. Tanisu rolls around on the floor, begging the voice to leave him alone. When he finally gets a break from that awful voice, he heads downstairs, only to realize he spent the whole night in pain and scared of losing everything he's worked for. Tanisu just lies there on the ground, exhausted and confused, as the whole room seems to fade to white in his eyes. After checking out the white room for a bit, Tanisu finds a spot on the couch. Just then, he sees Snow trying to grab something from the TV shelf and totally ignores him. Tanisu looks around the house and sees ghostly images of his siblings having a blast during a cook-off. These images keep popping up, and Tanisu remembers the first day they moved into their new place. It was just a regular day, but Isuri was being a total baby about where to sleep, getting all picky. After a lot of convincing from her siblings, she finally agrees to crash in the same room as them. Still, she complains about how bare the room is and wishes there was more furniture. One day, while heading to the city, Isuri spots a bug on the wall and tries to catch it. Ashisu stops her, freaking everyone out. Isuri listens to her twin and keeps exploring the city with Tanisu. To keep the fun going, Tanisu takes his siblings to the park to play. Snow sees dogs running around with balls in their mouths and immediately wants to join in. Luckily, Tanisu stops him before he can take off. Not long after, Tanisu takes his his siblings to a bookstore and grabs some popsicles for them to enjoy before they melt. Suishi takes a bite of her popsicle and loves it. After that, Tanisu leads them to another part of town to keep exploring until it gets dark. Back in the present, Sumeri finds Tanisu sitting alone and looking down. She feels bad for him and walks over to ask about his brother. Tanisu, feeling let down, stays quiet while Sumeri pushes him to share how his brother is doing. When he can't take it anymore, Tanisu tells her he has no idea about him. Sumeri asks if they were fighting, and Tanisu spills everything, including how he lied about his name and that he's actually Tanisu, not Kanisu. He also talks about his fight with the other siblings and wishes things weren't so messed up between them. After hearing him out, Sumeri forgives him for lying and tells him to go talk to his siblings and patch things up so they can get back to normal. Tanisu takes her advice and gathers the courage to head home and talk to his siblings. When he gets home, he opens the door and hears his siblings' voices inside. Tanisu rushes in, only to feel let down by the emptiness and darkness in the room. Tears streaming down his face, he rushes inside, starting to rethink his life choices. He opens a drawer and finds something that reminds him of one of his arguments with Isuri back when they snuck into the lab to grab the drugs and research materials. That night, Tanisu tried to talk Isuri out of staying in the lab because things could get really dangerous. But since Isuri was being stubborn and wouldn't listen, he gave her a key to the lab and some important rooms, just in case she decided to come back. When Tanisu remembered this, he checked the spot where Isuri kept the key he gave her, but it was gone. This could only mean one thing: Isuri and the others were headed to the island. Without wasting any time, Tanisu ran to a nearby store and begged the storekeeper for a boat to get to the other island. Unfortunately, the storekeeper was just a teacher and couldn't help him find a boat. Tanisu, who wasn't clueless, figured out a few reasons why that same teacher might have access to a boat. The teacher praised his reasoning, but then told him she couldn't let a kid like him go out on the ocean, even if he had a good reason. Instead, she thought about calling the police. Knowing the police wouldn't be any help, Tanisu stopped her from making the call and thought about his next move. The teacher tried to get him to explain what was going on, but Tanisu wasn't ready to spill all his secrets yet. Still, he told her that if he didn't reach them in time, he might lose his chance to make things right with them forever. Hearing this, the teacher got herself and Tanisu some raincoats to keep dry from the rain. Then, she took Tanisu to the beach to get a boat and sail across the ocean to the other island. On their way, the teacher, who introduced herself as Wei, and Tanisu found Kaito and filled him in on everything. Even though Kaito was a bit of a coward and a crybaby, he found some courage and decided to join Wei and Tanisu to save Isuri, Ashisu, Snow, and Suishi. Wei skillfully steers the boat through the rough waves, keeping it afloat and safe. Once things calm down a bit, Kaito gets some one-on-one time with Tanisu and listens to him. Tanisu starts by asking Kaito why he's helping him, since he can't handle things on his own. Kaito reassures him, saying he cares about Tanisu and his siblings like their family, even if they're not related by blood. Hearing this, Tanisu realizes he can trust Kaito. He stays quiet for the rest of the trip until they finally reach the island where the lab is. Tanisu sees the boat his siblings used to get there and rushes over to check it out. Kaito, though, stops him and encourages him to go find his family. Tanisu takes off into the forest to look for his siblings. After he runs off, Wei asks Kaito why he's not following Tanisu, and Kaito says it's because he trusts Tanisu to do the right thing. Meanwhile, Tanisu uses all his smarts to track down his brother and sisters to a cliff. He can't jump over it, so he ties one end of a vine to his feet and climbs down. Halfway down, he slips and falls, but he gets back up and keeps running toward the lab. When he gets tired, he yells out Snow's name and catches up to them quickly. Face to face now, Tanisu asks his siblings why they left him all alone in the city. Isuri and Ashisu explain the dangers of them being around him. Besides the discrimination from ignorant people, they could turn into full monsters and hurt their little brother. But Tanisu doesn't care about any of that. All he wants is for his family to be together again and to face their challenges as one. He gets emotional mid-speech and asks Snow what he thinks about everything he's done for them. Snow shifts into his man-wolf form to make his point. Monsters are a threat to humans, and if their identities get out, who knows what could happen. Still, Tanisu stands his ground. He tells them to believe in the slim chance they have to survive. He even confronts his older brother, asking why Snow acts so selfishly and ignores him when it's time to do something special. Snow looks away when Tanisu holds onto his shirt. In the end, he leaves Tanisu with Isuri and Ashisu. Before letting go completely, Tanisu tearfully asks Snow how he really wants to live. Snow, already teary-eyed, stares at the lightly rainy night and shouts his true wish, to live with Tanisu and the rest of his family without any problems. The Frankenstein family is back to being their usual selves. A few nights later, they all sit around the round table for a big dinner that Kaito, made. They dive into the food and really enjoy it, finishing everything in just a few minutes. Even Snow has a hard time staying human because the food is so good. After they finish eating, Tanisu grabs their attention and asks for their thoughts on whether he should tell Kaito about their family. Before they can answer, Kaito walks in and asks what they're keeping from him. The siblings go quiet, confused about what to do. When Kaito starts talking a lot, Tanisu jumps in and says they want to discuss their family. Hearing this, Kaito's mind goes off on a wild tangent about someone named Yu. Suishi, who's been reading his mind the whole time, gets fed up and annoyed at him for constantly bringing up Yu. Eventually, she tells him to shut up and not think about Yu ever again.